that came a little late, but I hope everyone's doing well. I know we're like a week and a half away from the course finishing, so I hope everyone's doing well just with everything in the course. Today will be our last CARS lecture. We're going to talk a little bit about timing, strategy, as well as scoring, and then we're going to do a bunch of passages. Before we get started, are there any questions? Maybe more general CARS questions, if you will. Okay, so here we go. Let's go share now. Okay, so as I said, today we're going to do our fourth and final lecture for CARS. So just a quick rundown. I always kind of review the other stuff as well. So in lecture one, we learned how to read. We learned how to answer questions. That's the breakdown of lecture one. Lecture two, we learned about the different question types, and the reason we did this is because we're analyzing our own work in terms of how we approach certain questions. And ideally, by now, you've started to shift maybe how certain questions are approached versus others. Lecture three, we learned about reading the questions first, if you like that as a strategy. We also learned how to skim. And this, again, as a technique is good, only really if you're running out of time. It's not a foolproof technique, so you don't want to use it for every passage, but it's good towards the end if you're running out of time. You can start to skim. You're not going for 100% on each passage at that point. You're just going for not skipping a passage when you get to the end. Okay, that was the quick rundown of lectures 1 through 3. For lecture 4, today we're going to talk about timing strategy. We've talked a little bit about this already, but I'm going to give you 3 different options that you want to employ in the test. So the first one is the one we've been working on this whole time. 10 minutes a passage, 9 passage, 90 minutes. That's what you want to average. As you're going through the test, you have to be responsible for your own time. There's not like a ding or something that'll happen every 10 minutes. You just want to have that handy. There is a countdown clock, so just have it handy or have a way that you can check on it quickly. And just make sure you're hitting that 10-minute mark. It doesn't have to be exact. You can be a little ahead of it, you can be a little behind it. It's actually okay as long as you're within range as you're going through the entire exam. Some people, though, definitely feel like they need a little bit more time than 10 minutes a passage. But of course, you don't have that if you break it down evenly. So, but because we learned how to skim the last time, you can actually use that skimming to your advantage in terms of timing. So one other version of this timing strategy you can use is that you're going to consciously skim on one passage, meaning this is part of your strategy. And this will give you a little extra time per passage for the other passages. So, and it breaks down, you have 10.5 minutes a passage for 8 passages, then 6 minutes for one passage, giving you that whopping 90 minutes. So again, you want to be comfortable with this strategy if you're going to use this timing strategy. You want to be comfortable with skimming, rather, if you're going to use this timing strategy. But it does still get you through the entire test, gives you a little bit more leeway on the front end passages, and just one passage towards the end of the exam, you got to choose that to be your skim. So, I got to be comfortable with a couple of different things here, but I know for some people it helps alleviate some of that stress. And then if we take that a step further, well, if you really like the skimming and you think it could work good on more than one passage, well, you can save yourself a little more time on the other ones by doing it twice. So in this case, again, we're going to consciously skim 2 passages. So we have 11 minutes a passage for 7 passages, and then 6.5 minutes for 2 different passages. Again, giving us that total of 90. And again, I would probably say go first and second, but third, if you're really good at the skimming and you really want to have extra time, you can utilize this. When you compare all 3, or really the second and third one, you're using skimming. And so really these strategies involve you working up that technique so that you're good to go for the entire test. You never want to get to the point where you didn't answer a question on the test. So the skimming technique, what it really does is allows you to get through the whole exam with some knowledge of the answers, as opposed to flipping a coin between B and C as the best guess for everything in a passage, since you didn't get to it. And small fun fact, it used to always be C was your best guess, and now apparently it's been B. So there you go. If I compare the 3 strategies, and this is what you want to start employing in the test, this is how they break down if you count down from 90. You will have a countdown clock on the MCAT. If you're doing your first strategy, which is our standard strategy, it's easy to keep track of, right? We all know how to count by 10, so 90, 80, 70, et cetera, down to 0. But the second and third are a little tricky because, 10 and a half and 11 minutes aren't the quickest math, especially if you want to just be focusing on passages. What I suggest, whatever strategy you want to use on the MCAT or whatever you feel comfortable doing, go ahead and write that strategy down like on your scratch piece of paper so you just have that timing ready to go. You don't have to calculate it in the moment. Meaning if you're at the fourth passage, you don't want to have to think, well, how many passages is it? What's, 10.5 times 4 and then subtract it from 90, right? You just want to have it ready to go. So if you have the three strategies, you have the three strategies in your notes. If you can at least commit second strategy to your brain, if you want to use it, then you'll know what the numbers are without having to calculate it, and just save you a little bit of time and stress throughout the test, because then you can just compare it to your countdown clock. And so then, regardless of which strategy you're going to use, you want to know that before you go into the test, right? You don't want to be deciding the day of, oh, I'm going to use this strategy today, right? You want to have had practiced with that strategy many times already. If you are going to skim, then the way to decide which one to skim can be a little tricky because we don't know which passage is going to be the best one to do it. But avoid things like philosophy and astronomy. What a lot of people like to do is look at the last two passages to determine which they'd rather skim, and maybe even the last three passages. And then you can kind of predetermine, okay, if I'm going to use my second strategy, I'm going to skim on one of these passages. Some people like to do it as they read, which is fine as well, because that can be topic based. But regardless, you want to write down the timing for your preferred strategy relative to the countdown clock. And then at that point, you start your exam. If you go with the first bullet point here, obviously that'll take you a few extra seconds. So you just want that process to be quick. If you go from the second bullet point, well, you're just starting the test right when the test starts, and then you decide as you go which one's going to be your skim. But again, doing it that way, it's going to be something towards the end, obviously not something on the front. Any questions on timing and these specific strategies? By a show, maybe in chat or just say out loud, how many people are hitting the 10-minute mark per passage consistently and comfortably? Someone's at 11. I am sometimes. Yeah. This is a tricky thing with CARS is I'm still working on that. Yeah. Depends on the passage type. Yeah. So what's tricky is that to be consistent on CARS is really hard. You want to consistently, right, be at the 10 minutes, and this is not always possible. So this is something that everyone should still be working towards. If you want, as you're starting to do diagnostics, just try to do the 10-minute strategy. I mean, that's obviously what we're going to try anyway, but maybe try to do one of the other ones to see if that works for you. You just have to work up the skimming and able to do that. The goal with the timing strategy, and this is really important to reiterate, is either of those three gets you through the entire exam with some knowledge of what the answer is going to be. And that's far better than guessing on one passage. Some people think, have heard that as a technique, and we're going to get into scoring next, and I'll show you why that's a terrible idea. So the best idea is to get to all questions with some knowledge of the answer, even if on one or two passages you're kind of skimming it, and so maybe it's not as in depth as you want, but you're not just purely guessing on an entire passage. Okay, any questions on that? And then real quick, actually, just because someone gave me the number. So Monica, you said you're at 11. So maybe try strategy 2, right? Try to push yourself to 10 and a half, skimming on one, and just see if that helps. And if you can get working on that consistently, then push yourself towards the 10, right? So you can even use the strategy to like kind of baby step you towards the first strategy. On the test as well, like if you feel confident with the first strategy, but you're falling behind, you can fall into the second strategy. So I'm gonna kind of go back to this, right? If you arrow, right? If you're on the first strategy, but you fall behind, you can kind of move yourself to the second, and then vice versa. If you're on the second strategy, you can kind of, but you're finding that you're ahead of the curve, you can move yourself into the first strategy. So, there's a little bit of fluidity in here in terms of like what strategy to use, but the main thing is to keep track of that time to make sure you're not falling behind, right? If you're spending 50 minutes on a passage, you're falling behind. So you still have to push yourself within these like 10 to 11 minute windows. Someone asked about the breakdown. So it's 10 minutes per passage is the breakdown, which is what that first strategy is. And time per question, it kind of depends on the reading. So 4 to 5 minutes for the reading, 5 to 6 minutes for the questions. That's how it would break down. Jonathan, that's a great question. So I would say you should probably work up skimming a little better in case you're running out of time. I think it's the kind of thing that you're going to need only if you need it, but if you need it, you want to have it to use, right? At the end of the day, do what you're comfortable with right now, but work up some of the other strategies. Again, ideally, we're all going to use the first strategy because we could all do each of these passages in 10 minutes. And maybe that means one is an 11, the other's a 9, and that's okay because that's averaging the 10, right? So you just want to kind of allow yourself to flow. And that's why I said before, the first and second strategy, maybe there's a flow between them, right? If you're falling a little behind, you can rely on the fact that, okay, I might have to skim at the end, but if you catch up on time, then you're fine. And so it's really about being responsible for the clock as you're doing this test, right? So every passage, making sure, okay, am I within this roughly 10-minute window? Yeah, and Jonathan, I think it's great to say, utilize skimming more as a handy tool in case. Absolutely. Ideally, you don't have to skim because the first strategy is your ideal strategy. 10 minutes a passage, you're not really skimming. You're giving each passage at least, giving each passage 10 minutes tops. If you go to strategy 2 or 3, you are consciously skimming on a passage or two, which again is not a bad idea. It's just not as ideal as the first one. That's all. All 3 of these strategies will get you through the entire CARS section with some knowledge of the answers, and that's the key point here, right? Because you don't want to get to the last passage and have 2 minutes left to go. At that point, you really are just going to guess on all the answers. Okay, any other questions on timing? Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is scoring. We'll spend just a little time on this, but this will also explain why it's not good to skip a passage. So here is the scoring, and it's, there's fluctuations within this because some years, the way the curve in the specific test, but in general, what you see is the national average is a 125, which is which is a 66% on the test, which is 35 out of 53. What this means is that you have -2 per passage. Right, so depends on where you're at. Maybe you get -1s, maybe 0s, maybe 3s, maybe 4s, whatever. But you're averaging -2 a passage. And I think over time, everyone feels like they can get here with a little bit of work. And if they're fine with the average, that's all good too. I know most people want to do better than that. So what I like to set your lower limit goal. Your lower limit goal should be a 127, which in this case represents a 75% on the test, which is 40 correct out of 53. This means that you're -1.5 a passage. That means that on some passages you have only -1, while on others you have only -2. And then if you want to push yourself up to closer to the 130 and you want to get to the upper echelon of this, which again is your ultimate goal, right? You're getting really just -1 a passage, right? And again, that could average to -0 on some, -2 on others. So it is an average, but that is really the ultimate goal that you want. But I think everyone, hopefully you're comfortable being near 125 right now and you're pushing yourself towards 127. If you could push yourself towards 127 consistently, then start to push yourself towards 129. But that's where you really want to work on CARS, is the difference between just a couple questions here and there can change these averages from a 129 to a 127 to a 125. So the reason you don't want to skip a passage is because if you skip a passage, you just assume you're going to get 5 to 7 wrong. You're already kind of limiting how far you can get on the test. So I know some people I think they've read that in some books or they've mentioned it before, but skipping a passage means you're automatically allowing yourself to have 6 wrong, let's say. And so already you're putting yourself really far behind in terms of where you can even make it on the CARS. This next screen, I think this is just, you probably have versions of this. This just ranks, just showing you the breakdown of the score and the percentage. This is something we'd hand out in person when we met in person. And on the bottom is the old versus the new, which I don't think really matters as much for people unless you're familiar with the old 1 through 15 system. So, but here's just a breakdown of some previous TBR students. And notice the percentage they get, 132, the 127. And so, yeah, if you want to be like in the 80 percentile and up, you got to be getting closer to those 130s. Okay, any questions on scoring? To be honest, I think this is the more important slide for scoring. Okay, the next thing we're gonna do a bunch of passages, but we're gonna do them kind of in a specific way. So this requires a slight discussion, so please speak up or chat about this. When you're doing these passages, is everyone trying to like, are you counting from 0? Are you counting down from 10? Are you doing like 2 or 3 in a row and just trying to make sure it's 20 or 30 minutes? Or how are you approaching that? And I'm sure everyone might have a different answer, so you could just chat it or say it out loud. Someone has from 0 timer. Yeah, so you time up, and I think I did say start that way, right? You just kind of seeing how far it takes. Anyone else to do? Has anyone like taken diagnostics yet, where in that case you're sort of timed and you're kind of forced into it? So I take my time and try to ignore the timer. Yeah. I think when you're first starting, ignoring the timer is not bad. You're getting used to the process. At some point, especially for those of you that are going to take the MCAT like in January, you got to start to force yourself into that time. Yeah, use stopwatch. Yeah, so to measure the length of time, that's kind of what Monica was saying. Start from 0, just kind of go up. Okay, so what we're going to do today, because I think this is a very useful sort of mental exercise, but it's also going to start to, you could use this to push yourself, it's like 5 or 6 passages to do. 6. And what we're going to do is I'm going to hopefully convince you to force yourself to do this in 10 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you all 6 passages right now. You could do them in any order you want. It does not matter. But every 10 minutes, I'm going to tell you to move on. And part of this exercise, obviously, is doing the 6 passages. But at that 10-minute mark, just move on to the next passage, right? Push yourself to get as much done in 10 minutes, but no more than that, right? And you're going to use that as a tool to see, okay, well, how much more did I need to finish this passage if I am pushing myself, right? Obviously, if you're like on the last question, maybe answer that one. But like if you're 2 off, know that, okay, maybe on a couple of these passages, I'm off by 2. But it's really good to start to force yourself into that 10-minute window so that you can start to really push yourself. And what you'll start to notice with the CARS MCAT, I think everyone feels this, is that you're just going to feel kind of rushed the whole time. So you really have to maintain that push for the entire, in this case, 60 minutes, but on the test, it'll be 90 minutes. Before I'll share a folder with all the passages, but any questions on that? Okay, so I think the easiest way to do this, and if you can't access this, let me know, but I'm going to share just a folder on Google, my Google Drive. There are all 6 passages. So I'm going to take a second to download those. If anyone prefers me to upload one each at a time in chat, let me know, but the link is probably easier. Okay, does everyone have the 6 passages? Okay, someone says needs a minute. Yes, okay. How about this? Let me know if you don't have all 6, instead of me trying to keep track of who's saying yes. The no's would be easier to keep track of. So chatter, let me know when you have them all the way. Otherwise, I can post them in chat. Okay, And just to confirm, does anyone not have the 6 passages? Okay, so what I'm going to do is, you don't even have to keep track of your own time, but if you want to, go ahead. But we're going to do this on a 10-minute cycle. I'm going to tell you every 10 minutes to move on. And again, part of the exercise is for you just to mentally move on to the next passage, and to kind of just use it as a tool to get through this. Before we start, are there any questions? I'm going to get my timer ready while we do this. This is so intense. Okay, everyone. Okay, to calm ourselves down then, because I'm going to wait for it to turn to 2:32, so it's easier to keep track of. We should all be on synchronized clocks. Everyone, take a moment to breathe. Right, just get your ideas ready. A few of those. Whatever you have to set up, make sure you have your highlighter, your highlighting tools, your notepads, whatever. And then just make sure to push yourself as you go through. You could do them in any order. You have 6, so the idea is to do each one in 10 minutes, so it doesn't matter. Jonathan, real quick, can you give us a few minutes? Yeah, so if we're not ready, that's fine. I could wait a few minutes. Is anyone who is not ready in terms of just being able to start right now? And it's okay if you're not. I just want to make sure, because I want to have us all on the same time. Okay, so Jonathan, let us know when you're ready. And Leanne, I think Leanne just said as well. Yeah, let me know when you guys are ready. Like, will it just be a couple minutes, or we could start like at 2:35? Yeah. How about this? We're going to start at 2:35. So, everyone has a few minutes to breathe and calm themselves down. Look at that. While we are waiting for 2:35 to hit us, yeah, Jonathan, 2:35, exactly. That's what I said. Are there any questions at all? So we have a few minutes just a couple minutes to kill here, unless someone wants to tell a funny joke or something. So we are doing 6 passages. Just going to give you a quick rundown then, since I have about a minute. It'll be 60 minutes at the end. We could discuss certain questions and answers if you want. I will, I'll give you the answer key if that's easier, because I know there's 6 of them. We won't have time to necessarily go through everything. But we could pick select questions and select passages if we all wish. All right, we have about a minute, so everyone just, maybe think about all your techniques you're going to use. Think about pushing yourself through those 10 minutes, and then we'll start. All right, cool. Jonathan's ready. It looks like everyone's ready. Well, again, we'll just start at 2:35, so we have about 40 seconds to go. Is anyone else not ready, just to be sure? I think at this point we are all good to go. So again, everyone, make sure to breathe throughout the process, right? It can be a little nerve-wracking to push yourself in 10 minutes. You want to be able to calm your body as you go. So everyone go ahead and take a deep breath right now. Right, start to think all the CARS thing you have to think about. And on your mark, get set, and go. you got going. And then take a breather. This has been an hour. And just real quick, did everyone push themselves to get it done in 10 minutes each, whether or not you finished? Because that was kind of, yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, part of the exercise today was obviously just doing the passages, but you really want to start pushing yourself. If you're in the, whatever, 10 to 12, 13-minute window, that's fine. You just, let's say you're scoring well at 12, right? You're not going to have 12 minutes every passage. So take what you can do at 12 and just start pushing it up, right? Push it up to 11 and a half, push it up to 11, push it up to 10 and a half, et cetera. Really start pushing yourself on that time just so you can employ the same process in a slightly quicker time. It's probably hard to jump 2 or 3 minutes at a time. So just go like half a minute at a time. So there's 6 passages. Obviously, we don't have time to go through all of them. I'm just gonna sort of make this a little easier. I'm gonna give you the answer keys now. We can then choose random passages or questions. That might be the way to go, just because there's no way we're gonna go through all of them. So here is the full answer set. Make sure I plug the right one in. And yeah, take a few minutes to look at the answers, and we could just kind of jump around from one passage to the next. What I probably will do is if there's a question on one passage, I'll just try to see if there are other questions on that same passage. So take a few minutes to look at your answers and then, see what questions you may have. And while you're doing that, this is our last class together. So thank you for making it each time. I do have office hours next week, which would be the last office hours for me. I know I think next week is the last week of class and everything anyway. So 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. still for office hours next week if you want to come by as well. So yeah, if there's any questions on the passages or questions, let me know. I do want to address what Monica put in there. I'm at 11 minutes. So 11 minutes is not a bad place to be, right? You're in range of being at the 10 minutes. So there's a couple of things we want to think about is if you're at 11 minutes and if you're doing well at 11, you just want to start to push yourself towards 10. And the thing is not to lose your efficiency, right? So, just try it in 10 and a half and maybe employ skimming on a passage. As you start to practice full diagnostics, you still want to get to all questions and answers. So, you could start by pushing yourself to 10 and a half, but including one on a skim. And then if you get a little better at that, then to start push yourself towards 10 without the skim. So because like when you're doing the reading and analysis, there's never these big jumps that are going to happen. They happen very slowly and over time. So yeah, I think a good way to do it is like a half minute at a time. That's probably the best. I do think like the exercise we did today, right? Like kind of forcing yourself into the 10-minute window is a good idea. I mean, force yourself into an 11-minute window or a 10.5-minute window, whatever it is. Kind of put that time constraint on so you start to push yourself into it. Some of this will be based on when you're going to take the MCAT. So the sooner you take the MCAT, the sooner you should start that technique. If you're not going to take it for a little bit, you could still focus more on just getting better at the technique. But with like maybe a month to month and a half to go before an MCAT, that's when you want to start pushing the time on CARS. And really on all of it. So. So responding to Charu there, yeah, the level of difficulty is comparative to the AMAC. Some are harder, some are easier. There's always going to be sort of a mix of them. So. Alap, that I think that happens to a lot of people. So part of the forcing yourself in the 10 minutes is that discipline of what do I need to do to get to the 10 minutes, and maybe that means cutting that question off. Right? Like if there's 6 questions and you could do 5 of them in the 5 minutes, right? But your 6th one takes you 2 minutes. Well, maybe that's the one you just kind of, I'm not saying skip, but just, at some point cut your losses and move on, right? It's okay to slightly guess on one question instead of never getting to a passage at the end. And so there's just like, there's that, it's a little bit of a judgment call, but if you're getting too far away from the 10 minutes, that means that you got to make those decisions prior to the 10 minutes. Yanika asks about number 4 on the let older workers choose. Yeah, that's probably the toughest question out of the whole bunch. Number 3 as well. Let me just grab that passage. Oh. Yeah, no, number 3, that is, I think, probably the harder one here. I would say we'll go over this, but this is sort of unfortunately one that's like a little bit more logic based, which you're not really going to see in the MCAT. So, typically for this one, if you can get it between A and B, that's a great place to be. You should be able to knock out the other 2 based on reasons in the passage. Between A and B becomes more of like a logic problem, which you're really not going to see in the MCAT. So in some ways, this question isn't exactly representative, but if we can get it between A and B, that's great. This would be question 3 on passage 5. And actually, let me get it shared up on the screen. Give me 1 second. Here we go, passage 5. Yeah, it is a tricky one. Like I said, it's a little bit more of a logic one, but it's difficult. It's one that you couldn't spend as much time as you might need to in the MCAT. So if you got it to A or B, I think that's a good place to be for this specific problem. Okay, number 3 rather. So we have here, assuming that a government refrains from trimming pensioners' entitlements as a way to reduce the burden on public finances, which of the following is the most important reason to explain why a small increase in the age at which people retire could have a big positive impact on the economy? So just based on like what the pastor just talking about and based on sort of finances, like you have money going into the government and that money is going to go out of the government to pay for stuff, which is in essence what A and B are referring to. So again, if you can get it to A and B, that's great. For C, you don't really know, you don't really have enough information to figure out if that would even be the case. We just couldn't really add it into what's going on in the question stem in the passage. And then satisfaction is probably the throwaway answer. That has nothing really to do with, the reason why the increase in age. So the retirement to productivity, again, you don't have a good way to tie it in. So those two are kind of the ones that you toss out. Then between A and B, this is where it gets really tough. So A says, but you have money going in, right? And B says you have money going out. And then the question is, what's the most important reason to explain why a small increase in the age at which people retire could have a big positive impact? And so what's happening is you have these forces that are fighting each other, right? Money going in versus money going out. And how do you equate the two? And this is where, again, it becomes more of a logic problem. So what I did to help explain this one, I have like a thought experiment. So if I'm going to retire tomorrow, that means today I'm paying taxes. And then tomorrow I no longer pay taxes, but I am going to be taken out in retirement or whatever else, right? Well, if I don't quit tomorrow, or if I don't retire today, rather, it means tomorrow what has changed? Well, nothing really. I'm still paying taxes. But I'm not taking out money from the pensions and maybe any healthcare. So the reason B is the better answer is because if I retire today, the only way to ensure that the explanation stays, the only reason the explanation is true is if I would assume someone else would take my job. And so again, if I'm working today and I retire tomorrow, I'm definitely no longer putting in, but I'm definitely taken out. But if I just stay working today versus tomorrow, the situation hasn't really changed at all. So that's why you go with B, which again, I know it's really splitting hairs. Someone asked here directly, can you give general trends, recommendations for daily practice? Yeah, it's very much like I've mentioned before, is you want to just go through the process, really analyze how you're doing the reading, how you're approaching the questions, start to do more than one passage at a time, and then go back and really analyze all of your rights and wrongs, right? Like, for example, why did I get question 3 wrong? What are my reasons, right? Maybe I got 1 correct. Why did I get 1 correct? Like, you really want to question all of that. You'll start to see patterns in your own thinking, but also patterns in how the tests are given. But yeah, the only way to get better CARS is to do a bunch of the passages and do a bunch of the reading. And then you're just looking for, just discrepancies on how you're approaching everything. And then you want to improve those over time. With CARS, though, it's a very stepwise, but also plateaued way to do it. Like, it'll take you a long time to get better. So it might feel like you're not progressing, but you are, because your brain and your body are going through the process. Someone asks here, should we always do the 10-minute constraint? Well, I think it depends on when your test is. So if people are taking the test either this month or next month, I would say start to push yourself into that 10 minutes. If you're doing it beyond January, then maybe you could wait a little bit. But with about a month and a half to go, you want to start really putting yourself into that time frame. A lap asks here, on some passages I got all the questions right, which is awesome, right? That you got the -0 part, but then like 2 passages got half wrong. So that could be a variety of reasons why you did that. You need to go analyze, because again, someone else maybe did great on those passages, but bad on others, right? So you need to go realize for yourself, what was about this passage that was weird for me? Was it a like subject material? Like, I don't know, maybe it's an arts passage and I can't stand reading arts passages. And for that reason, you just go read more arts passages to get familiar with it. It's the kind of questions that are asked. And then if that's the case, go kind of figure out how to approach those kinds of questions differently. Sometimes when you're doing a lot of passages, and you'll start to notice on the 9 passages, you might hit a wall halfway through. So maybe on the 4th or 5th passage, it doesn't matter the subject. You're just tired. because you've been going for 40, 50 minutes without stopping. So start to look at like your own energy, right? Like when does my brain start to wane, and sort of take that 10-second break. I always joke around, like slap yourself a little for a second, shake your head, do whatever you do you need to kind of like refocus. But you can look at all these different reasons, and chances are it's probably a combination of all of that. A lot for you specifically. I mean, we'd have to go through those two passages to see why on those two did you not do as well as the others. No, perfect. Yeah, yeah, and I would say, kind of to further answer your question a lot, are there ways to reduce the kind of variability? Is again just by getting better at this process, so that you get to the point where it doesn't matter what passage or subject or content is given to you. It's just a bunch of words. You're reading it, and then you're relating the questions to it, and so that you want to get to the point where like you're comfortable enough with the process. The subject itself doesn't matter. I think on the front end though, the subject helps us, right? Like things we like, we're going to do better at. Someone asked about the context questions. We'd have to maybe review it specifically, but it really is the content of the words around it and within that sentence. And then also, like, sometimes you can plug in the answers they have and see, like, would this make sense based on everything around here, and almost rereading it with those words in there. Yeah, so the Hume's passage, that was hard because it was like an old way of writing. It's like a sentence is a paragraph. You shouldn't expect many of those on the MCAT, but it can pop up. In the Hume's passage, it's just, yeah, you still got to keep track of the ideas, and there's lots of long sentences. You have to be careful in how you're reading. I love that comment, Leandro. I didn't wake up until two passages into it, judging by my scoring trend. So that actually brings up a good point, is that, it's a 90-minute test, and it's literally go hard and strong from the get-go, which means by the time the clock starts, you want to mentally be ready. So at least when you're on the MCAT, and maybe do this before you take diagnostics, find out how in that 5 to 10 minutes before you start to wake your brain up. And literally that could just be done by like maybe reading something, like not answering questions and doing a passage, but just reading something that's a little more CARS like. Because if, like, especially in the test, you're going to do the physical sciences section first, that means your brain's going to be all like physical sciences, right? Chemistry, physics, etc. And you want to get your brain away from that. Take a few minutes to read like an article in Harper's or something, just a few paragraphs, just something to shift your brain, right? Because like when the clock starts, you have to be ready to go. You can't wait two passages. And I think, as I answered before with the LOP, it's like sometimes like halfway through you're going to hit a wall because your brain's like tired. And so again, finding where your energy is waning, whether it's at the start, in the middle, or at the end, or wherever, and find ways to combat that, right? Because you need to be on for 90 minutes, right? Nonstop, 90 minutes, be ready from the get-go. At some point on the MCAT, at least for the entire exam, it does become a stamina question as well as a knowledge question, right? Like, can you get through the 6-7 hours without like totally frying yourself and being sort of fried at the end of it, right? If you're fried for the last, whatever the last test is, I think it's bio, you're just not going to do as well in bio, right? So make sure you don't fry yourself up. Part of that is building stamina. Leandra, no, I probably just spoke out of turn. Like, I don't remember what the order is. Is it physio is last, or with psychology, that section is last? No problem, Alap. Like psych soc, yeah. So I think it goes physical, cars, bio, psych soc. I think that's the order. So yeah, I was just random example. I think when I took the exam, bio was last. I think that's where my brain was remembering. Yeah, physical, CP, cars, BB, P. Oh yeah, I was thinking PS is physical sciences, but no, I mean psych soc rather. Yeah, so when I took the exam, there was a writing prompt. We didn't have the psych soc section. So I had we had lunch, and then we had writing, and then we ended on biological. And I was fried by that point. I remember like at some point halfway through the biological being like, I just don't care anymore. I didn't give up, but I think my brain was like, F this, I'm done. But you definitely want to finish. And oddly enough, I did better in bio than I thought I would. So somehow I think by saying I didn't care in the moment, I just like powered through it. So I'll say, obviously it's almost 4, I'll stay on later if people have questions, but if you don't have a question, that's all good. You can take off. It's been a pleasure being with you guys for these 4 lectures and whoever came to office hours. Come to office hours next week if, that'd be the last one I have for this session. And, otherwise feel free to reach out if you have any other questions or anything else. I know all of you have my email. So I know we're all taking the MCAT at different points. So some of us might be gearing up to take it now, while some might be waiting for a few months. So questions may always arise, so feel free to reach out. But otherwise, feel free to take off, or if you have any questions, I'll stick around for a bit. No problem, Alap. Thank you. Absolutely, Jonathan. Thank you as well.